Hello everyone and welcome to another Beth Radham video Dvar Torah. The high holiday season has officially come to an end. In my last video I thanked all of our shul staff and volunteers for all of their wonderful and hard work. The white robes and covers have all been stored away for another year, and we've rolled our Torah scrolls all the way back to the beginning to start off once again with the story of creation. Yes, in many ways it feels a bit anticlimactic, missing our chance to dance with the Torah this year, missing seeing our friends, family, and neighbors. But life continues on in the continued hope that one day soon our world will be back to normal, and we will be able to properly celebrate with one another once again. But in the meantime, the earth, as it seems, spins on, which actually brings me to the fun topic I'd like to cover today, in honor of Parshat B'reishit, creationism and science. It was a serious twist of fate that earlier this year, Jamie and I decided that our TV time was intruding a bit too much on real life, and that it was time to finally cut our cable. We would still be able to watch shows and movies that could be streamed on the internet, but we were going to try and evolve beyond a lifestyle of having TV on all the time, mindlessly watching whatever happened to be on. About 2 weeks later, the pandemic hit, and we were suddenly really regretting our decision. But we got used to it, and it wasn't too bad. We found other more productive activities to fill our lockdown time with, and when I was in the mood to watch some TV, I'd browse around for something interesting to watch on YouTube. One particular YouTube channel that I became immediately engrossed in, along with some 400,000 subscribers, belonged to Simon Dan. Like Madonna or Cher, he had no last name that I could discern, just a guy with a neat-sounding moniker who heroically sifted through the smelly underbelly of the internet for videos put out by conspiracy theorists, flat earthers, and other similarly nutty people, and created his own counter video systematically debunking each claim they presented using science, sound evidence, logical reasoning, and verifiable reference material, along with a wonderfully entertaining dose of catchphrase sarcasm. It has always been a never-ending source of amusement for me to look down a rabbit hole and see just how wacky we humans can sometimes be, and this series was just my style. As a cherry on top, I also love to learn and study science and the nature of our world, especially those times when it can be a bit counterintuitive for most of us who say, believe the earth is round, but will likely never in our lives be able to go up in space and really see it for ourselves. However, as much as I admire people like Simon Dan and others doing similarly noble work on YouTube, there's something he does on occasion that irks me quite a bit, which is when he dismisses biblical stories, including the story of creation, as valueless rubbish. Now, it shouldn't surprise anyone at all that many of the people responsible for the content that Simon Dan debunks are emphatically religious, typically some variety of Christianity, as they derive their beliefs from a completely literal interpretation of the biblical creation story as historical truth. In this strange post-truth climate we all live in, I happily advocate for anyone involved in the critical mission of defending science and facts against the forces of ignorance and mysticism. But faith is a category entirely separate from these, which holds unto itself a very different kind of truth. It's a kind of truth that allows me to say that as a clergyman, a person of faith living in this modern world, that the literal interpretation of the biblical account of creation, taken as historical fact, is an ideology that does not reflect what I, or dare I say most, moderate followers of any of the Abrahamic faiths believe. And despite this, we don't think it's rubbish at all. To demonstrate this, I'd like to offer just one example, and if it seems there is a desire for more, I would be excited and happy to offer more commentaries on the subject. What is sentience? How do we determine whether an organism is sentient? Is it a measure of the awareness of self? A measure of intelligence or cognition? I actually and very honestly don't know what the answer is. But I think it should be easy enough for everyone to agree that human beings today are sentient, and that if we go far back enough along the evolutionary chain, there must eventually be some kind of ancestor to Homo sapiens who we could also agree is not sentient, even if we have to go as far back as a single-celled organism. I can also admit that I have no idea whether the human transition to sentience was an extremely long and gradual process, or whether it was a relatively short one in our evolutionary history. But no matter what, we must be able to say at some point a transition occurred, whether we are talking about one individual who was the first to be sentient, or a larger group over a longer period of time. Let's call these first individuals Adam and Eve. And God formed the man of dust from the ground, and he blew into his nostrils the soul of life, and man became a living being. That's B'reishit, Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. The story of sentient humanity begins. The human, becoming self-aware, began to try and understand the world in which he or she lived, which seemed to magically have everything that was needed for survival: shelter in caves, fruit and berries for food, a carefree Garden of Eden. Except it was not entirely carefree, because there existed in it something that was forbidden. The sentient human does not yet have a sense of morality yet per se, but at this stage, perhaps more of a rudimentary understanding of a distinction between things that can be used for benefit and things that, unless avoided, will cause harm. The latter is represented by the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Meanwhile, quote, God had formed out of the ground every beast of the field and every bird of the sky, and brought them to the man to see what he would call each one. And whatever the man called each living creature, that remained its name. Again, Genesis, B'reishit, chapter 2, verse 19. According to our metaphor, this translates to the sentient human gaining intellect, learning rudimentary language, and assigning names to the animals and other objects around him, whether it's gestural or vocal, so that more complex ideas could be shared between other capable human beings. As language develops, so too does human social interaction. Man and woman are able to bond as a pair beyond sexuality, and we now have intimacy. I believe this concept is particularly well reflected in the biblical language, as when God creates woman out of man, the term that the Bible uses as the nature of the relationship between man and woman to be ezer kenegdo, literally translated, a helpmate opposite him. A relationship based first on social interaction, not on sexuality. At this point, what we've done is draw a parallel between what we can reasonably understand about the anthropological development of human sentience and the biblical narrative. But we could rightly ask, so what do we learn from this? Whether we get it from one side or the other, it seems to be pretty much the same. The answer is that in the biblical account, what we are learning about is the nature of God. Although God may be personified in the story of creation, God is not a person. God, rather, is the source of sentience in the universe, And in doing so, God creates something called purpose. While it's demonstrably true that the universe could certainly exist without sentience, what would be the point? Why should it matter at all whether or not the universe even exists if there's no being who can appreciate it? Make something of it. Fill it with amazing things. You might even say that sentience is the point of the universe. Humanity, therefore, is God's gift to the universe that the universe might actually know itself. We learn from this that our sentience is a precious gift, and that we are meant to use it to learn, explore, feel, create, and show our gratitude to God who gave it to us. Religion is not science. It isn't fact. But it is also neither ignorance nor mysticism. Even though it can and has been masqueraded as each one of these by different people for thousands of years, some better than others, it's not for everybody. But I don't think it's reckless to say that it has something of value for everybody. And at the very least, it's not rubbish. Shabbat Shalom.